In Jujutsu Kaisen, there are some controversial matchups to say the least, that amongst the community are some of the most prevalent and hard to pin down debates of all time. Most of these insane power scaling arguments revolve around some top 5 series characters, so it's understandable. And with Jujutsu Kaisen's complex power system, in the sense that a character can be overcome by pure matchup and typing alone, like in Pokemon, as opposed to sheer force of willpower and overpowered abilities. Most of the time at least. Okotsu Yuta, Kashimo, Hakari are some characters that come to mind where sometimes not only is it directly unclear what the result would be, agendas and bias interrupt a lot of the clear thinking. So in this video, I want to debunk one of the toughest battles in Jujutsu Kaisen scaling of all time, and that's Maki Zenin versus Kinji Hakari. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're interested in seeing more content like this, and most importantly, thank you for watching. Obviously, these two heavy hitters that make up the remaining force of Jujutsu High's fighting ability need no introduction. Let's get right into the thick of the discussion and cut out all of the fluff. Hakari's jackpot. Let's talk about it. Without going too in-depth, after Hakari successfully lands his domain expansion, Idle Death Gamble immediately info dumps the target with all the rules and bonuses possible after the innate technique takes effect. The domain's effect takes place in the background, playing relatively close to a gacha game, where while Hakari and his opponent duke it out in the midst of whatever crazed anime scene is playing, Hakari is constantly gambling for matching card numbers, and when landing that matching set, he is rewarded with bonuses. This bonus is, of course, jackpot. 4 minutes and 11 seconds of nigh immortality, where Hakari's stats are significantly boosted from a consistent flow of cursed energy, and his healing becomes automatic and highly accelerated, exceeding the regeneration speeds of even Gojo Satoru or Ryomen Sukuna themselves. We see Hakari escape death 4 times in his battle with Kashimo, thanks to not only his advanced reverse curse technique, but his insane luck when it comes to striking the right numbers and hitting repeat jackpots to keep the stat boost going. And in his fight against Arame, Sukuna's servant, Hakari shows his ability to press and almost completely ignore their devastating ice attacks, as if they were nothing, in order to continuously land critical hits. When it comes to Maki Zenin, another powerful foe, yet a person who was not able to immediately brush off Arame's ice in such similar fashion, although she exhibits the pinnacle of human strength and speed similar to Toji before her, is that enough to handle a threat like auto regen? The question isn't whether Maki Zenin, a character that has already proven her physical worth in battle against 15-finger Sukuna, or annihilated an entire clan of Jujutsu sorcerers alone with mere access to curse tools and her bare hands, can fight on relative ground with Kinji Hakari. The question is if Maki has the endurance and stamina to continue going back and forth with Hakari, who seemingly may actually have infinite time and energy to take Maki out through attrition. Not even getting to the nitty-gritty of who's stronger than who, Maki's first problem is Hakari's quote-unquote immortality, and a potential answer to that would be the Soul Split Katana, a recreated cursed weapon of the late Toji Fushiguro that is capable of ignoring any and all durability, slicing through any surface. It also, most importantly in this context, cuts directly at the soul. The Soul Split Katana, cleaving through any of Hakari's limbs or vital organs, poses a threat to the gambler on the basis of causing damage he can't actually heal from. There are multiple instances of evidence that can provide proof that attacks done by the Soul Split Katana cannot be healed from, besides the sheer fact of Mahito's presence in the series, also proving that soul damage can cause irreparable damage to the body no reverse curse technique can restore. The Soul Split Katana is a cursed tool responsible for bringing down not just the Rainbow Dragon, a cursed spirit with the strongest hide in Suguru Geto's arsenal, and delivering a wound it was unable to regenerate from, vengeful spirit Naoya, once Maki is able to fully awaken the true power of the sword, tears Naoya into 2 pieces and renders him a fatal hit he's also unable to recover from. On top of rendering curses unable to heal, when battling Sukuna inside of Megami's body, Maki opts to not use the Soul Split Katana in fear that she would harm Megami's body in a way that that could not be repaired through reverse curse technique later. Again, just the fact of the matter that the blade is doing soul damage is enough of an argument to justify its effectiveness against Hakari's auto regeneration. However, without dying on this hill, whether or not you believe this is fact, if you believe Hakari Kinji just himself alone is a force of nature strong enough to bring down Maki, well, then jackpot doesn't necessarily matter, does it? Why would auto regeneration or Soul Split Katana's special properties even hold weight if Hakari can just defeat Maki through pure battle skill alone? Kinji Hakari, as one of the remaining big three of Jujutsu High, is well known as one of the strongest modern sorcerers in the entire series. Not only does his domain expansion and jackpot bring him into the top tier, but from his battle experience and intelligence alone, he can deliver a pretty serious threat. Through Hakari's short fight with Charles Bernard, we can see that Hakari's special cursed energy property adds an even more potent secondary layer of pain to Hakari's physical strikes. Hakari's speed is also an intense aspect of the fight, as even when Charles can see 2 seconds ahead of time through precognition, the man still has a tough time keeping up with the gambler. Although we have to keep in mind, Charles Bernard is very inexperienced. Against Kashimo Hajime, a much more veteran and fellow top-tier sorcerer, Hakari also delivers very impressive feats. Hakari matches an old-school warrior like Kashimo in martial arts by just plain berserking his way through any offensive strategies his enemies make, a benefit his jackpot allows him thanks to his auto regen, something that gives him an advantage in his fight against fellow reincarnated sorcerer Orame as well. The Jujutsu High student is able to run at extreme speeds, kicking volumes of dust behind him in order to keep up with Kashimo. And also, Hakari was able to acknowledge Kashimo's lightning bolt attack, not necessarily react to it, as although Hakari is able to shift slightly and have the bolt strike his shoulder, if the man was truly a lightning timer, he would have been able to get out of the way completely. Still an impressive feat in and of itself, being able to notice a bolt of lightning just in time and react minimally. But as of right now, that's all we can give Hakari in the department of speed and reaction time. The man's durability is also quite impressive, given Hakari does survive 2 of these bolts in critical locations on his body, as well as having the quick thinking to commit a binding vow into surviving the giant last-ditch explosion Kashimo set off. While a strong foe, Hakari benefits greatly from his jackpot ability here, and isn't propelled into a level of power like Kashimo without this immortality. Again, the man would have died 4 times had he not been able to constantly recreate the conditions for his domain. All of this isn't to say Hakari wasn't able to make the best use of his luck. I can acknowledge the quote that you need the skill to make use of your luck. However, that does not let you run away from the overall fact that without any luck, Hakari's skill alone would not have gotten him as far as he did against Kashimo. This does not prove anything though, as next up we have to scale Maki, and in her 3 major instances of showings after awakening in the culling game, a lot can be said about Maki in the physical department. She is a powerhouse in attack power, able to deliver lethal blows with just her bare hands, and completely incapacitate other curse techniques by sheer force of will alone. Maki was quick-witted enough to not only notice and correctly time a proper counterattack against Naoya's projection sorcery, she was durable enough to withstand his accelerated and powered up attacks during his onslaught, being thrown through buildings, into mountains, the ground, among other things, and she still picks herself back up every time no problem. Although she can't use reverse curse technique like Jackpot Hakari, she does have subtle regeneration if given a short amount of time to rest, shown when Vengeful Spirit Naoya damages her internal organs and she heals back into a fight-worthy state in a short 3-minute time span. Again against Naoya, Maki unlocks her full potential, a form of extrasensory or foresight of the souls around her, allowing her to tap into the extreme acrobatics and peak human potential that Toji Fushiguro was also able to. Now she can outreact and outspeed one of the fastest characters in the verse, Vengeful Spirit Naoya, and bully him with her bare hands, while also being able to use the unseen atmosphere in the air to deliver the most critical hits to the most vulnerable locations and set up proper counterattacks. Using her lack of curse energy to her advantage, Maki Zenin is able to sneak up on even Ryomen Sukuna of all people, completely invisible to most sorcerers' senses, which not only makes her highly capable of sneak attacks. Similar to young Gojo's fight with Toji, it makes it that much harder to keep up with and predict that person's movements. Most sorcerers attack and defend based on patterns in cursed energy. We see a smaller version of this invisible effect when Itadori Yuji fights Yuta Okkotsu, as Yuta is able to falsely change change the flow of cursed energy against Yuji, making the latter think Yuta is attacking from the left, but he's actually slashing from the right. Maki takes this idea one step further, in which the enemy isn't able to sense anything at all from her, meaning they have to rely on base fight instincts and reaction, something most sorcerers are frankly just not used to. Maki Zenin at her peak is able to impress a 15-finger Sukuna and worry Arame enough to make the servant focus all of their cursed energy on her, freezing her solid. When you consider that all of this is Maki Zenin barehanded, adding the Soul Split Katana, a sword that can't be defended against and can't have any damage it deals healed, Maki becomes much more dangerous. But on top of all of this, Maki also has her special domain expansion clause. Maki, due to having zero cursed energy, is essentially immune to most domain expansions. This is because a sorcerer's barrier considers a being like Maki almost as if she's an inanimate object. A rock, a wall, something that just got caught in the barrier and either needs to be pushed away or brought into the barrier as a basis. Because of this heavenly restriction, Maki cannot be targeted by domains against her will, which, long story short, means unless she herself enters the domain from the outside, Maki can't be pulled into a sorcerer's domain. And even if she chooses to enter that territory, the domain's innate technique won't recognize her, rendering the one-hit kill clause or innate technique of the ability in general null and void. This is seen when Naoya's projection sorcery effect does not touch Maki, let alone know where she is inside of the domain, despite him supposedly having full and total dominion over the space. This adds a lot to Maki's assassination skills, letting her sneak into a domain and land a killing blow unseen or unheard, especially someone that isn't aware of this property. And again, with the Soul Split Katana, a lethal blow would be delivered that cannot be healed. Now, for a character like Hakari, who we just described requires his domain expansion to reach that full height of power, what does this ultimately mean? Well, for starters, on Hakari's side of the argument, this means Maki can't be targeted by the initial info dump of Idle Death Gamble. If Maki is not aware of Hakari's domain conditions, which to be fair, she probably would be going to school with him and all, but let's judge based off of her not knowing, Maki would literally never get the instructions of the domain, and thus, if it takes effect and she tries to enter it, Maki would be clueless as to what's going on. Now, of course, this is a small benefit to Hakari, who is now free to fight Maki inside of the domain, and she's none the wiser to his jackpot rolls going on in the background. After a confusing mess of anime romance and fisticuffs, eventually Hakari would land jackpot. The music would start, he would get his power up, and he would overwhelm Maki, who would have no idea what just happened. But this scenario does come with a couple obstacles. For one, although being the most nitpicky problem, is the clear fact it's not exactly confirmed if Hakari can activate his domain expansion without a target. If there is no opponent being casted on and no info to dump onto someone, does Idle Death Gamble even work? I don't believe there's a single instance of a character laying out their domain by themselves, especially ones that have a sure hit. When Maki snuck attack Vengeful Spirit Naoya, he had 3 different targets to lay his domain on: Daido, Mayo, and Maki. It was only after dealing with Daido and Mayo that he noticed Maki was missing. But again, let's say sorcerers don't need targets to lay out their domains, as this is something that the series never confirms or denies. The even larger elephant in the room is the time in between Hakari casting domain and landing jackpot. We know from all Hakari's fights so far, until a jackpot is hit, base Hakari has to battle his opponent inside of the territory for however long it takes for the odds to line up in his favor. This can take anywhere from the first roll to the 30th. So depending on how lucky Hakari is at any given moment, this can range in time span. So this means Hakari has to not only go back and forth with Maki in base mode, it also means all of his auto regen is turned off during this part of the fight, meaning even without Soul Split Katana being involved at all, any damage Hakari takes from Maki in these moments are permanent until he gets jackpot, as without his domain being active, Hakari unfortunately does not have access to reverse curse technique or his stat boosts. While on equal, if not even higher ground in jackpot, when it comes to base Hakari, who is no doubt weaker, the gambler will be facing an opponent in Maki who has unlimited and full access to all of her power from the start, as unlike his battle with Kashimo, Hakari cannot start a fair fight in jackpot. So from the jump, Hakari's fighting an uphill battle, trying to land jackpot as soon as he can to try and get on that quote-unquote roll that would make him stronger than most characters. Even scarier is the fact that Maki's domain immunity would give her the advantage of first blood upon casting. lasting, as even if Hakari can open Idle Death Gamble without being able to target her, once the barrier is summoned, Hakari is essentially a sitting duck for Maki until she decides to enter. Whether or not she delivers a decisive blow in this moment, Hakari is no doubt at a disadvantage, as the invisible Maki could go in and out of Hakari's domain and fight unfairly. Or, I mean, if you want to say that once she reveals herself, Hakari is forever now aware of her, Maki's still, again, at full power, while Hakari's handicapped until landing lucky numbers. Granted, Maki would have no idea of this background condition, so if Hakari does land it and get jackpot, she wouldn't realize he received his buffs until it was too late. But again, considering Maki's battle IQ and the fact she was able to completely decipher Naoya's projection sorcery from scratch, it's possible she would be able to endure the first 4 minutes and 11 seconds and then pick up on Hakari's ability after. It must be stressed, Maki Zenin's durability is like steel. Even if Hakari lands attacks on her in jackpot, with his cursed energy trait included, it's gonna take a lot of damage to bring Maki down. To bring up the fight with Kashimo again, throughout their entire scrap, the reincarnated sorcerer doesn't take a single critical blow from Hakari. Despite being tossed and punched by Hakari point blank multiple times, Kashimo's stamina never seems to waver, nor does he seem to take any internal or lasting damage from the fight. Now, in a battle like Itadori Yuji against Choso, after 3 impactful blows from Yuji, Choso considers himself almost done for and needing to end the fight quickly, whereas despite all of Hakari's efforts, we never get a similar moment or acknowledgement from Kashimo. The sorcerer does admit it costs him a lot of cursed energy to take Hakari's hits, but even without cursed energy, Maki's durability is able to take punches from 15-finger Ryomen Sukuna and barely flinch. Someone who I'm pretty sure Kashimo would also need to use plenty of cursed energy to defend against. The point of these comparisons are essentially all used to deliver home the idea that without the full effects of jackpot, it's gonna be pretty hard for Hakari to have any standing in this fight. A warrior who can not only sneak attack Hakari from the jump, but has plenty of time to overwhelm and defeat him before Hakari can even reach a relative level of power. All of these problems stem completely from Hakari's reliance on his domain, and the fact he can't regenerate at all without jackpot being active. However, for all the props I've now given Maki for her battle IQ, the one saving grace for Hakari is that he also has a pretty high level of intelligence. Despite not being at the forefront of his selling point, Hakari is a very clever fighter. Even though his style revolves around blitzing through defenses and ignoring damage thanks to his healing factor, in his fight with Kashimo, he's shown to be quite tactful. When Kashimo is steadily showing little signs of energy loss, Hakari picks his domain up and changes its coordinates, making the lightning god fall into water, taking advantage of Kashimo's elemental weakness off of a hunch, and making the reincarnated warrior exhaust all of his cursed energy in the ocean. Showing that Hakari, despite me arguing that he's all immortality and nothing else, is smart enough to assess a situation and figure out what the best course of action is. So, with that being said, even if Hakari is against all odds and finding it hard to reach full power, would Hakari still be able to adapt and find out what Maki's weakness was? Take full advantage of the situation and turn the fight around? After spending so much time discussing the weak points and vulnerabilities of Hakari, it's only fair to consider the same for Maki. Maki Zenin's heavenly restriction capabilities ultimately allow her to ignore most domain hacks, as well as reach a physical level of some of the most powerful characters in the series. Although, in a lot of fights against people like Gojo or Sukuna, there are numerous aspects to those fights against Maki that keep her from being effective. Gojo's full evolved Limitless easily dispatches Toji, so it would be the same with Maki. Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine, being an open barrier with a condition to destroy even inanimate objects, presents Maki with a huge threat as well. Even characters like Takaba or Yuta, with their added curse techniques, give them a huge advantage over pure bouts of physical strength. So it's easy to see how a character like Maki, though very strong, can fall short in the sorcery world when it comes to the supernatural, something even her father points out to her. However, besides the insane stat boost Hakari gains from jackpot, most of the attacks Hakari musters are of the physical variety. Punches, kicks, they all have plenty of force behind them, granted, but up against a tank like Maki, who can survive most of those hits, as we've seen time and time again, Hakari's gonna need something a little bit more to get the edge on her. Hakari can manifest some of the portions of his domain expansion background, such as Pure Love Train's doors or the pachinko balls, being shown to shut a person's head between the doors or even flick the ball as a projectile attack, but none of these options are really the kind of supernatural advantage I'm looking for. Meanwhile, on Maki's side of things, with the access to extra sensory and the foresight to always move in the best direction or react in the most beneficial way, the ability to quote-unquote see what cannot be seen gives Maki a huge advantage in physical fights. Always knowing where to dodge, what's the best place for her strikes to land and do the most damage, this all harkens back to Hakari fighting an uphill battle, as he's going to be trying to gain jackpot against a warrior who can perceive the best ways to counter and hurt him before he can even reach her level. And even once Hakari does reach Maki's level, it's just more of the same with added immortality that not only will Maki be able to react and keep up with, the Soul Split Katana, for all intents and purposes, might remove Hakari's immortality clause entirely. For every question Hakari brings up, Maki has an answer. With domain immunity, she has a massive advantage and multiple win conditions to defeat Hakari before jackpot even takes effect, and he's no doubt weaker than Maki during this intermission. So even if you don't want to consider Soul Split Katana a win condition, in a battle of attrition, despite Hakari's immortality normally giving him the win in most fights, surprisingly, Maki's gonna score higher in this fight, as once the 4 minutes and 11 seconds ends, not only is Hakari vulnerable again, he must go through the same rolling process, putting him at Maki's mercy, and with Maki's durability helping her survive any serious attacks Hakari can land, while her precog and extra sensory lets her keep up with and dodge most of the other ones, it's safe to say she can bring Hakari back to zero through multiple domains if she needs to. Unfortunately, where Hakari has little to no win conditions against Maki, only having the hope he can eventually overpower her in the long run, Maki can exploit almost every single weakness Hakari has by completely crippling Idle Death Gamble. She can land a lethal sneak attack right off the jump, and if that misses, she has multiple chances to do it again. And even if Hakari lands jackpot, she just fights through the time limit and repeats her advantage. Give her the Soul Split Katana, and even jackpot doesn't make a difference. No healing means no berserker fighting style, and a cut off head is a cut off head, jackpot or not. As one of the most powerful characters in the series, Kinji Hakari could take on most, if not all, other sorcerers and still have a decent chance of winning. But when it comes to the peak of humanity, Maki Zenin is just a horrible matchup for Hakari. Not because she has a better ability or anything, but frankly, she does everything that Hakari does, just better, and with no setup required. Which is why, frankly, you should all stop debating Maki vs Hakari, because clearly Maki Zenin, the war god, clears this challenge no problem. She is the number 2 sorcerer, making Hakari Kinji number 3 because we already know the new number 1 is Okotsu Yuta. But that's for another time and another video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I sincerely appreciate you if you made it all the way to the end. If you haven't, make sure you hit me with a like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this straight to your feed. Click on an end screen video if you want to continue your binge, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.